काय च धर्मस्य सर्वधर्मस्वरूपिणे अवतारवरिष्ठाय रामकृष्णाय ते नमः. So, as you know, today's topic is Buddha as a world teacher. Now, Buddhism has become a world religion, and one unique feature of Buddhism as a religion is that originally Buddha did not give any importance to speculation or philosophy. It's a very interesting aspect of Buddhism. Today, if you go to a library, you'll find hundreds of different different titles written on philosophy of Buddhism or Buddhist philosophy. But Buddha himself was very reluctant to explain any metaphysical question. In fact, he was asked many questions on philosophy, afterlife, existence, origin of the universe, and so on. And his answer was that it did not in any way benefit our daily life, so it has no relevance. That was his response. He emphasized some of the basic everyday realities of human existence. And it has something to do with his early evolution as a teacher. He was born in a royal family. He was a prince, son of a Hindu king in what is now called Nepal, which was at that time part of Indian subcontinent. The demarcation of the border happened only in 1947. Before that, Nepal was essentially and culturally part of Indian subcontinent. So Buddha was a son of a king in Nepal. And when he was about to be born, just before his birth, it is said in Lalita Vistara and also some of the well-known traditional biographies of Buddhism, or Buddha, Ashok Ghosha and others have written well-known books on Buddha's life. So it is said that an astrologer predicted, when his mother consulted an astrologer just before his birth, what will be the future of this child who is going to be born, whether it be girl or boy, whatever it is. The astrologer predicted that he will be an emperor, a conquering emperor, an emperor who will conquer many parts of the country, or he will become an emperor of ascetics. So he will become a prominent person either as a king or as an ascetic. Now it so happened that his father was very much concerned after the birth. The child was brought up in an atmosphere of luxury without giving him any chance to see the darker side of human life, like sickness, old age, poverty, or any of the normal problems that people have to confront in their life. So Buddha was actually living under the delusion that life is all about enjoyment as a prince in that palace, in the court, admired by people, in the midst of luxury. And he was married, and it is said in the traditional biographies, it is said that there was a big competition of martial arts, different forms of fighting techniques like sword fighting, archery, and so on. And Buddha excelled in all of this, and he became a champion warrior. So the king was very happy, but this man is going to be a big conqueror. And then, he was married. And then when he was about 28 years, He already became a father, and one day he was taken out along the streets of Lumbini, the small town, the capital of the kingdom, of which his father was the king. And as he was being taken around in the city in a chariot, he had some wonderful experiences which opened his eyes and gave him an idea of the darker side of human existence. Till then he had known only the happier side of human life. Happy life in a court, in a palace. But then as he was being taken along in the streets of the city, he happened to see a procession going. It's a dead man was being taken to a cremation ground in a procession by his relatives. And then after some time he saw an old man sitting in a street corner, very miserable looking, old, sickly, and wretched looking. And then he saw a person who was very sick. So sickness, old age, and death. These three problems of human existence. Especially death was a big eye-opener to him. You can live in this world without sickness, but you cannot avoid old age and death. And he asked some questions to the charioteer, an elderly person who was a wise man, and he could answer, "O Lord, O Prince, no one can escape old age and death. The poverty, of course, you can avoid. Very often many people can avoid." And that made him thoughtful. And then when he was about to return to the palace, he saw a saintly looking person sitting in a street corner with a beard. He was a monk, a Hindu monk. And he observed his face, and there was no misery, no fear, nothing. It was a radiant face of a man full of contentment. So at that time he realized there is another possibility. Not only dukkha, which he later called dukkha, samsara, this problem of life, getting old, going through painful and pleasant circumstances, experiences, and the inevitable problem of old age, and even the more inevitable problem of death. And then he saw here is somebody who is not concerned about all this. His look was a kind of a transcendental look. So that is how he came to know of another possibility, which he wanted to internalize and experience. And that night he left his palace, leaving behind his wife, his parents, and also the child, little baby. Remember, we should not get away with the impression that Buddha was a cruel man. No. Later, his wife, his parents, and also his son, all of them became great Buddhists in later years, after Buddha became a world-renowned teacher. They also were inspired by his example, and they also had this higher transcendental life. So that's another part of the story. And then he walked, so it's about 1,200 miles, it is said that he walked from Lumbini to what is now known as the Bodh Gaya in the state of Bihar, which actually was the seat of a great empire at that time. So you'll be surprised, after Buddha, this empire expanded. It's called the Magadha Empire. And under two great kings, one is Chandragupta, who was the original founder, and also Bimbisara. During their times, this empire extended all the way from what is now Kandahar, that is in Afghanistan, is Gandhara. From the west, right up to Burma, Myanmar, in the east, and from Azerbaijan, Kazakhstan in the north, and up to Sri Lanka. So this huge land area, geographical region, is almost maybe almost double the size of present India. So that was a big empire. And the place where he went to, Bodh Gaya, was very close to the capital of, not far from the capital of this huge empire, which later became such a big empire. So Buddha walked all the way and he reached Bodh Gaya, and it is said that he took a strong determination. And he sat under a tree. And then he took a strong resolve, which is put in a Sanskrit verse, Ihasane sushyatu me shariram jagasti mamsam cha vilayam cha yatu aprapya siddhim bhujanma durlabham naivasanat kayamatas chalishyate. This is the Sanskrit verse in which the biographer wrote this well-known book in the 2nd century AD, puts the resolve in Buddha's mouth. As he sat under the tree, he took a strong determination. I won't get up from the seat under this tree till I attain the highest spiritual enlightenment. Let my body perish, let it be reduced to bones and marrows. Tugasti mamsam cha vilayam cha yadu. What it means, let this body be reduced to bones, marrows and flesh and perish. But I won't get up from this seat where I am sitting for meditation till I get the supreme spiritual enlightenment. And he sat there. It is said he sat for several months. So according to some sources, it's more than a year. And finally, he got spiritual enlightenment. And during this time, when he sat for meditation, it is said that all his previous life cycles flashed in his mind. So you can find a well-known book, Buddha's Rebirth Stories. It's an English translation of the Sanskrit book, Jataka Tales. Jataka means Buddha's previous life cycles. So this was Buddha's 544th life cycle. He was born 543 times. There are various views, 542, 541, like that. But anyway, that is actually insignificant. So more than 500 life cycles he had. At the end of it, he was born as Gautama Buddha, Siddhartha, as a prince, as son of the king of the kingdom in Lumbini. So here the question, in fact, this has something to do with Buddha's great philosophy. You know, Buddhism is unique in one important aspect. And remember, of course, this is very important to remember, Buddha was born as a Hindu and he was trained as a Hindu warrior. He was a Kshatriya in the warrior class. And he has studied all these well-known Sanskrit scriptures which every Hindu was supposed to study, the Vedas and so on. And in fact, Buddhism became a separate dispensation only around 80 years after Buddha's passing away. According to some school, after 50 years, there was a Buddhist council, the first Buddhist council. Apparently, the oldest and first council of the delegates belonging to one religion, different denominations of one religion, that took place in Rajagriha, which is the capital of the kingdom, Magadha Empire at that time, which is very close to the city of Patna in Bihar state today, Rajagriha. So in that council, Buddha's disciples, both lay disciples and also monastics, they remembered his teachings, which are actually given in Pali language, Pali, the script, he spoke in Prakrit. So Prakrit is what you call unrefined form of Sanskrit. So Buddha was a man of the masses. He spoke in the language of the common people. He didn't speak in the language of the elitist. The elitists, the scholars, the pundits spoke only in Sanskrit. I'll tell you something very funny about this fanaticism of Sanskrit language. It's a historical fact, not a myth. In 15th century, in one of 14th to 13th century, in one of Indian states, there were 19 poets in a royal court. One of them, they were all Sanskrit poets. One of them also wrote something in the local vernacular. For that, he was reduced to half a poet. So the assembly of these 19 poets were known the assembly of 19 poets. And because this man wrote something in the local vernacular, so it came to be called as 18 and a half poets. So just giving an example of the elitist obsession with Sanskrit. This in 13th, 14th century, to be very precise, in Kerala. The fanaticism of Sanskrit. But Buddha, living in 6th century BC, was a radical humanist, to use a term that will be very well understood in modern times. He spoke and lived among the common masses and spoke in the language of the common people. It's called Prakrit. And some of these Buddhist monks and laymen, including, of course, nuns also, they were there, they remembered Buddha's original teachings in Prakrit, and then they codified this into 3 scriptural traditions. It's called Tripitaka, Sutta Pitaka, Vinaya Pitaka, Abhidhamma Pitaka. 3 canons of the early Buddhism, which were in Pali language. That was the beginning of Buddhism as a separate dispensation. That means, for almost 60 years, even after Buddha's passing away, Buddha lived and was known as a Hindu teacher, very similar to maybe to Jesus Christ, who was essentially a Jewish rabbi to begin with. But then after St. Paul entered the scene, it became a separate dispensation known as Christianity. St. Paul was a Roman, so he was converted and he gave it a new identity. The same thing happened to Buddhism. So Buddhism came to be known as something separate and different from Hinduism. From that means around 360 BC onwards. Buddha was supposed to be born he was passed away in 480, and he was born in 560, passed away 480 BC. You have to count backward. And about 360 BC onwards, Buddhism came to be known as a separate religion, separate tradition. But the point I was trying to make was that Buddha was essentially a man of the masses, a man who believed in the cults of the common people, and he spoke in the language of the common people. Now, when I mentioned this Buddha's meditation and these 543 life cycles, it has something to do with Buddha's teaching himself. Buddha's teachings was essentially based on 4 noble truths, 4 fundamental principles which are necessary for every spiritual seeker to understand. They are known as Chattvari Arya Satyani, 4 noble truths. The first noble truth is that there is a problem in life, dukkha. Dukkha. You remember, when you go for the dictionary meaning of dukkha, those who don't study Buddhism in the context of its total philosophical evolution, you won't understand the real implication. What Buddha meant was, everything in this life is transient. Nothing is permanent. Everything is essentially impermanent. And this life itself is really a problem. Problem in the sense the life is incomplete and imperfect. Why? Because there is enjoyment, but there is also suffering. There is pleasure, there is also pain. There is the good things, there are also bad things. So everything is transient. This is what we call samsara and goes on rotating depending upon our activities or karma. We get the results in this life, and some of the results are retained for next life to experience, and according to our actions in this life, we are born again, and in that life also we continue doing things according to the characteristics, according to the tendencies we acquired in this life. So everything is essentially depending upon something else. Everything is conditioned. What you do now today with whether you are thinking with your mind or doing things with your hands, all decided by certain internal characteristics. And these characteristics are the result of certain actions that you have done either in this life or next or previous life. So everything is essentially dependent upon something else. So this interesting principle is called the pratitya samutpada, or dependent origination. It's an important contribution of Buddha to world thought. It actually answers many of the problems that we ask ourselves in our life. Why do I go through all these difficult experiences? I led a good life. I only helped people. I did a lot of good things. Still, I find things going bad for me. There are many people in this world, the villains, those who are just released from the jail, they are happy life. But you have done only good things. Still, you have to suffer so much. Why this contradiction? We cannot really find an answer. We can easily find an answer if we can think of a God who is absolutely uncompromising. Everything is non-negotiable. God just chooses you do this, and God chooses another person, you do that. That is very simple. You can create an arbitrary God who will not take no for an answer, and who will tell you what you should do, and you accept what he gives you, and whatever it is, good or bad. This is very simple. But Buddha was not satisfied with that sort of speculation. He wanted to find out an answer based on our own life. So, if I have done only good things in my life, still I have to go through difficulties, there should be a reason for this. There should be a condition, a background, a precedent, an answer, certain circumstances which have created this situation. And he called this phenomenon as pratitya samutpada. It's called a 12-link chain. This is a very unique analysis of human life. And the whole mystery of human life is unraveled by Buddha in a very logical manner. So now the question arises. So the first noble truth is that life is full of suffering. There is dukkha. That's because the world and our human life are essentially impermanent and incomplete. And then the second noble truth is there is a reason for it, there is a cause for this. There is an origin for this suffering. And the origin or the cause of the suffering is our attachment, our desire. We will explain this in course of time. Our attachment and our desire. Our attachment to things which are transient, and our likes and dislikes, our hatred and our attachment or love for certain things which are totally irrational. This is a cause of sufferings. So what does he mean by suffering? It should be understood. Suffering is some kind of a mystery. To give an example, I mentioned this earlier. Suppose you, as I mentioned, you live a very good life, you help a person. This is the input, so to speak. Then output should be, you should expect a reciprocal reaction from your friend whom you have helped. You have led a good life. You should be blessed with a lot of happiness. This is a mathematical equation, logical equation, explanation. But it doesn't work like that. As I just mentioned, there are many characters in Mahabharata who suffered endlessly, but they never did anything bad. You can find in human life, in our own life, everywhere you find. People turn to spirituality very often as an attempt to find an answer to this mysterious problem. You do everything good and you get the opposite result. So the logic of mathematics and physics won't apply here. So you look for an answer. And Buddha looked for an answer and he found there is a cause behind. Once you understand the cause of that problem, then you can get out of this. And then the third noble truth is this cessation of the suffering. The suffering can be put an end. We can get out of the suffering through detachment of desire and by getting rid of the craving for enjoyments. And then this can lead us to the next step of practicing 8 fundamental moral ethical principles. And that will take us to nirvana. And that will lead to the cessation of suffering. Now, I want to go back to the second noble truth. That's very important with regard to Buddha's philosophy. The second noble truth is the cause of suffering. There's a cause behind. The cause is not visible. If you look around, as I mentioned, there is no real answer. There is no real logical explanation for this contradiction, this paradox. You do everything good, but then you don't get the corresponding result. The result is the opposite. So here, Buddha is trying to explain everything in terms of the entire phenomenon of causation of suffering. And once you understand, you're out of the problem. This may appear to be strange for many of us. There are certain problems in life which we cannot really solve physically. But once we understand the nature of the problem, the cause of the problem, then the problem is no more a problem. So that's the method Buddha applies. For example, he says, because of our ignorance of the reality of life, or reality of world, reality of samsara, means everything is transient, everything is impermanent. We don't know that. It's called avidya or ignorance. So what happens is, because of this, we get attached to many things in life. We get attached to mind, body. We get attached to different objects of enjoyment. The 5 senses, like for example, eyes, ears, the sense of smell, sense of touch, sense of taste, all these 5 senses, and mind together. They gather tendencies and impressions from external world. And because we do not know that these things are transient, they are not permanent, they are impermanent. So what happens is, we get attached to this. I can give an example. Suppose you get this example is so well known, it's part of everyday life experience. You get some email or some information from Medicare provider, so to speak, or doctor, who tells you that you have a serious illness. Something, that, of course, that can be cured, but still, the information suddenly will devastate any normal human being. That's because he is under the impression that body is not meant to fall sick. He doesn't remember, he doesn't know that human body is not permanent. He thinks human body is permanent. He doesn't know the human body is essentially impermanent. So we attach permanence to something that is essentially impermanent. We know the human body is bound to fall sick one day or other. Maybe after 100 years you may fall sick. Maybe it's in a few years. It's a matter of time. And it has to disappear. We know this, but in everyday life, this knowledge doesn't function as an everyday common sense. So suddenly you get a Kaiser letter, something immediately collapse. Oh, you think everything is collapsing in front of you. Oh, stock markets collapse, you lose $1 million, everything is collapsing. But then the stock markets are not supposed to remain stagnant all time. Otherwise, don't be stock markets. Economy will collapse. It has to change. So many companies, so many stocks. Body also has to undergo this change. So what happens is, in everyday life, this intellectual understanding doesn't become everyday common sense. I mean, a common sense that we can use whenever we want, when we deal with realities of life. It is called avidya. So avidya technically is interpreted as ignorance, the English translation. So you want to understand what is ignorance. Avidya is ignorant. The books will tell you avidya is ignorance of the anatta, the impermanence of samsara. Again, that leaves a lot of questions unanswered. So what Buddha is talking about is this simple thing. We may know intellectually, but we are not able to make use of that knowledge as a tool in our everyday life when we confront problems in our everyday life experience. So this avidya, this incapacity. So that is the source of all problems. The moment you understand everything is transient, no problem. You will certainly work hard to regain your health. You will certainly make new investments with the stock exchange. You will certainly address the problem, but you won't be shattered. That's the only difference. So remember, Buddha did not bring a God into the picture. That's why Buddha is so well popular in America, actually. Because when you bring God, then that God tells you to do something, so you read this book, and he threatens you with hellfire, and he promises reward for you. If you don't, you have to face the consequences. Nothing of the kind. Buddha just asks us to look around and try to convert this everyday intellectual understanding into everyday common sense. And the inability to do that is called avidya, or ignorance. And because of this ignorance, what happens is we develop extreme likes and extreme dislikes to certain things. Obsessive attachment and extreme aversion to certain things. Raga, dvesha. And that creates strong samskaras in our mind. We can see this in our own life. people sometimes start disliking certain things without any logical explanation. And they get extremely attached to certain things, obsessed with certain things, without any logical explanation. They may be aware of the ridiculousness, the stupidity of this kind of attachment. But that understanding of the stupidity cannot help them to get out of this extreme obsession. So that leaves us in a state of total helplessness. So Buddha tells you, you keep this in your mind. What is to be kept in mind? The fact that everything in this world is transient. Remember, this is also a very important principle in Advaita. So modern interpreters of Indian philosophy, beginning with Swami Vivekananda, had constantly reminded us that Buddha was only giving a humanistic interpretation of Upanishadic philosophy. That's Swami Vivekananda's. And following the footsteps of Swami Vivekananda, Swami Chinmayananda, Paramahamsa Yogananda, the great Swami Sivananda, who is the founder of Divine Society, all of them, and Dr. Radhakrishnan, of all people, the great academic philosopher, they always presented Buddhism as a humanistic interpretation of Upanishadic philosophy. When you come to humanism, you don't have to bring in a God. Maybe partly because Vivekananda found that God was not a very popular person in the late 19th century Europe and also in the east coast of America. That's one of the reasons why Swamiji gave this new interpretation. It's not a new interpretation, it's a fact. You find everything in Buddhism is taken from the Upanishads. And not only that, anyone who is interested can compare Dhammapada, the part of the Sutta Pitaka, the philosophical portion of the Tripitakas, which are all in Pali literature. It is the most well-known textbook on Buddhism actually even now. Apart from the suttas, suttas mean hymns, among the well-known foundational books of Buddhism which anyone may take up for study, Dhammapada is the most well-known book, one of the most well-known books on Buddhism, which is acceptable both the Hinayana Buddhists and also Mahayana Buddhists. Now, Dhammapada, you find in Dhammapada many ideas are literally taken from the Bhagavad Gita. You can, if you are interested in academic sense, you can compare the 26th Bhagga, means chapter of Dhammapada. It's called 26th. Bhagga means Varga in Sanskrit. 26th section or 26th chapter of Dhammapada. It is actually almost a verbatim translation of the 18 verses from the second chapter of Bhagavad Gita. Tam buhi bhamanam, that is how Buddha ends. Him I call a wise man. In Bhagavad Gita, him I call a man of spiritual enlightenment. From 55th to 72nd verse of the second chapter, you got the characteristics of a spiritually enlightened person. 55th to 72nd, 18 verses. It gives a list of the characteristics of a spiritually enlightened person. And there you find that Dhammapada is nothing but a Pali version of the Sanskrit verses from 55th to 72nd verse of the second chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. So you find the avidya we mentioned here, transience, the fact that everything in this world is changing, impermanent. Keep that in mind, problem solved. Jagat Mithyatvam is the idea in Advaita, same thing. And then Buddha says, this ignorance makes us extremely obsessed with certain things, either in the negative way or in the positive fashion. Either we develop an extreme dislike for certain things, aversion, and sometimes an extreme liking for certain things. Both are bondages. And they function as impressions or samskaras. And then what happens is, these samskaras get deposited in our system, and with that we are born. So we are not born with tabula rasa, as John Locke says. We are born with a slate with fully written. All our samskaras are there. It doesn't mean that our life is just a repetition of previous life. Not at all. It is not fatalism that Buddha is preaching. What he says is, there is much more than what is visible on the surface. When you see an iceberg, you can see only 10 feet above the water level. 90 feet of the iceberg, much bigger than what you see outside, is below the water level. Like that, what we do, what we think, what we experience right now, at this moment, it has something to do with what we experienced, what we lived, what we saw in some life, in some previous life cycle. Once we understand this, then you don't go and hit your head against the stones in the bay. What do you do when you get an information? You get a doctor tells you you are a serious illness, there is a way out, but you don't get shattered. So every problem has a logical explanation that goes back to some previous life cycles. This is Buddha's magic. Now remember, many of these Buddha's ideas were taken up by many parapsychologists of America. They rarely acknowledge that's another problem. Edgar Cayce, who was one of the pioneers of this field, of course he frequently referred to Buddha. The whole concept that there is another life other than what we are living now. This idea came to America from Buddhism. Remember, you have to remember, till 325 AD, there is a year in which Constantine declared Christianity as the national religion of the Roman Empire in 325 AD. That is the year the Council of Nicaea was held. And there, after the council, Emperor Constantine, the Roman emperor, and his mother deleted all references to love, karma, and reincarnation from the Christian canonical literature. So by the time Augustine came up in 5th century AD, there was nothing left. It means before 325 AD, before the Council of Nicaea, even Christian religion had accepted love, karma, and reincarnation as a fact. It was rejected at the intervention of Emperor Constantine in 325 AD. So, Buddha says, avidya, samskara, and vijnana. Vijnana is the initial consciousness that when you are born, it is deposited there. Now, this much about past life. Now, Buddha is talking about the present life. What he says is, in the present life, we also gather new samskaras. When we see things with our eyes, mind and eyes, they put together, they connect, and then we see things, mind and the sense of ears come together, we hear things, and mind and sense of touch come together, we touch things, mind and the sense of smell, that helps you to smell things, and taste also, same, mind and sense of taste. So all these experiences bring new samskaras, which are added to the huge deposit of previous samskaras. And again, sense experience, all these continue, and in our present life also, we gather new samskaras. And then what happens is, this process is being enhanced. It is emphasized by a strong thirst, desire, trishna. Trishna is clinging, because we clinging to enjoyments, clinging to life. I want to enjoy. I want to enjoy these things again and again. If we don't succeed in removing all our desires before we leave this world, then we have to be born again to somehow fulfill those unfulfilled desires in the next life. So, if you find somebody who is obsessed with some strong desire, it means he was looking for fulfilling those desires either in his childhood or not in his childhood, in previous life. So this clinging to life, and it's called Trishna, and this thirst for enjoying things, they keep this cycle of samsara revolving like a wheel. That means birth, life with all the experiences, death and rebirth. In each life we gather new samskaras, and these samskaras again cause another life, and that life also again keeps accumulating new impressions, new samskaras. This continues. So this samsara, this cycle of birth, life, death and rebirth, it continues rotating. Now, some people may not feel there is a problem in this. Why can't we let it rotate? No problem. Buddha is talking about people who are looking for something transcendental. Remember, that's one important thing to remember. Buddha was being taken on a ride, chariot ride in the city, when he saw these three visions: a dead body being taken to the cremation ground, an old man looking miserable, and a sick man. So he felt there was a problem in life. What's the use of this kind of life where you get old, you fall sick, you die again, are reborn, again you get old, you die again, you are reborn. What's all? Actually, there's no meaning in it. So people who feel a meaninglessness in such a situation, Buddha is addressing those people. Those who find this is wonderful, well, Buddha says no problem. They have to live through several more life cycles to reach a stage of evolution where they feel a kind of dissatisfaction with this ongoing game of enjoyment, suffering, death, rebirth, again enjoyment, suffering, this rotation. So, because remember, Buddha was accompanied by his charioteer. That man didn't walk with him to Buddha Gaya. Only Buddha left the palace and walked to Buddha Gaya to become a Buddha, and meditated and became a Buddha. His father didn't worry about those things. And also his ministers didn't. And also his charioteer didn't. So those who reach a level of spiritual evolution, not just in this life, but previous life, means continuous. You accumulate a lot of samskaras, impressions in previous life, so that you have reached a point of evolution and growth where you feel that this is enough. Suppose every day, 3 times, 4 times a day, you have to eat that most wonderful caviar, let us say, or something. You have to eat morning till evening. Your room is filled with caviar or the most wonderful, delicious food. And you fall sick. Then you want to drink some water. You want to go out of this. So people may not feel that kind of dissatisfaction. So Buddha, in some of his, in the Satyupattana Sutta, it is a Pali version of Smadhyupasthana Sutra, which is in Sanskrit, but the origin is in the original form is Mahasatyupattana Sutta, which was a bigger, a larger version of this book, which is addressed to general people, laity. And a shorter version is called Satyupattana Sutta, which is actually the Bible of mindfulness. So whatever you may call it, mindfulness is nothing but a small little fragment of Buddha's original discourse, which is known as Satyupattana Sutta in Pali language. Now, there Buddha talks about different levels of spiritual aspirants. So those who are not evolved enough to feel the need for higher wisdom, they don't share your view that there is dukkha in this world. Dukkha literally means something unpleasant. But it is not misery, it is the fundamental problem of impermanence or transience about everything in this world. And the fundamental reality of non-existence of anything that is permanent, anatta. That's the idea behind. So, this makes you feel like looking for something transcendental, something to get out of this life of experiencing the ever-changing, the impermanent things, and getting attached and going through pain and pressure, all the way from one life cycle to another life cycle, without the wheel ever stopping, without the cycles ever coming to an end. So there should be a way to come out of this. And the way to come out of this is to remove the fundamental cause of this samsara, that is avidya. And this avidya can be removed only by practicing the eightfold discipline called Madhyapantha. It is called, we will discuss again, it begins the eight important disciplines that Buddha mentioned, that is Samyak Drishti, Samyak Sankalpa, Samyak Vak, etc. And Samyak Karma, Samyak Ajiva, Samyak Vyayama, Samyak Smriti, Samyak Samadhi. That means the right speech, the right mindedness, the right way of living our livelihood, and the right kind of speech, and the right memory, the right concentration. And what is the right concentration? What's the meaning of right walk, right speech? That we will explain in the coming lecture. So once we do this, then we realize that all these things are transient. And when we realize this as a fact of experience in our life, we get out of this. And that is called nirvana. So nirvana actually means something that comes to an end. That is, it comes to an extinction. What is coming to an extinction? This samsara. This game of the rotating wheel of birth, enjoying and suffering, more and more, dying, again being reborn, again this continuation of this, it has to come to an end. And this will come to an end when we attain this fourth noble truth. We will discuss in the coming session. So thank you, Namaskar. Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om Tat Sat. Sri Ramakrishna Arpanamastu.
वेदान्तवाक्येषु सदारमन्तः भिक्षान्नमात्रेण चतुष्टिमन्तः अशोकवन्तः करुणैकवन्तः कौपीनवन्तः खलु भाग्यवन्तः मूलन्तरो केवलमाश्रयन्तः पाणिद्वये भोक्तुममत्रयन्तः कन्थामपि स्त्रीमिव कुत्सयन्तः कौपीनवन्तः खलु भाग्यवन्तः देहाभिमानं परिहृत्य दूरात् आत्मानमात्मन्यवलोकयन्तः अहर्निशं ब्रह्मणि ये रमन्तः कौपीनवन्तः खलु भाग्यवन्तः स्वानन्दभावे परितुष्टिमन्तः संशान्तसर्वेन्द्रियवृत्तिमन्तः नान्तं न मध्यं न बहिस्मरन्तः कौपीनवन्तः खलु भाग्यवन्तः पञ्चाक्षरं पावनमुच्चरन्तः पतिं पशूनां हृदि भावयन्तः भिक्षाशनादिक्षु परिभ्रमन्तः कौपीनवन्तः खलु भाग्यवन्तः
The subject for next Sunday is Buddha as a world teacher, part number 2, the continuation of the same topic of different aspects. Childcare is provided during our Sunday lectures. On Sunday evenings, there is an online class at 6 p.m. on the foundational text of Indian philosophy. The Zoom and YouTube links are available on our website's homepage as well as on the monthly email bulletin. On Wednesday evenings, we have Vespers with meditation at 7:30 p.m. in this auditorium. On Friday evenings, there is a scripture class at the Old Temple at 7:30 p.m. Please use the auditorium entrance on Filbert Street. The current text for study is the Bhagavad Gita. The class is also streamed. You and your friends are cordially invited to attend all of our services. After the lecture, there will be a Q&A, question and answer session in Vivekananda Hall, and all are welcome. So please remember, on Sunday, every Sunday, including today also, there is an online class on the foundational text of Indian philosophy. The Zoom and YouTube links are available on our website homepage as well as in the monthly email bulletin. Thank you. Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om Tat Sat Sri Rama Krishna Arpanamastu.